Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast. As you can see, it's Fitz and Cole Carmody to talk a little football this time around as we break these up into smaller tidbits. Cole, I'm gonna be the proud uncle. I thought Ethan kicked butt, knocked it out of the park. My kid knows his women's basketball, and I can't wait. We're going to start doing some of that for volleyball, I think. If volleyball's going to be as good as I think they'll be. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of that. And I'm going to say it. I'm going to be public about this. Our daily deliveries on women's basketball don't perform that well. In fact, the last two worst and maybe the past month have been that topic. So we're conscious of that. We track these things. That podcast is performing really well. So maybe it's not the topic. It's me. We needed Ethan.
I think it's just the Fitzgerald. It's the Fitzgerald draw. People see double Fitzgerald and they're drawn to it. I mean, I can't say that I blame them, but no, Ethan did a really good job. That's really good stuff. And obviously that team is rolling right now. And that's a big story. That might be the biggest story around K-State athletics right now is
really
how are they going to respond without her?
And to clarify, there's Ethan Fitzgerald is his pseudonym. His last name is Woodall, which is his father's last name. He is my sister's child, and I don't like to claim her. So it gets very confusing. Let's get on with these. We got some interesting questions here from Wabash Station, and that's how this gig works. If you are a subscriber at Go Powercat, you can submit your questions in our weekly podcast thread, and now we're breaking it up into these smaller topics. I will have Ryan Gilbert on. It'll be tonight. It'll be the next day. It gets so confusing. And we'll talk about a little basketball, whatever happens in the game against Baylor, which we're recording this before we pay attention to that. It's like a giant time loop. It's hard to keep track. Let's get rolling. I'm babbling. Here we go. Let's get first one up here from STZ318. I don't recognize the name. STZ318. Define the significance of the Ireland game versus Iowa State. I thought this was cool because, one of the things that jumps out at me is the fact that it's the next game.
Yeah.
Or the next how many ever months you want to talk about college football, you're going to, you're not required to say it, but it's the next game. It's August 23rd in Dublin. And these are two really good football teams. This might be their best matchup they've had. This is a significant game on the field, but I think he's asking about the publicity of all that. So give me your thoughts.
Well, as soon as the national championship game ended, you're perusing the social media websites, and inevitably perusing. Yes. Inevitably you'll see only 200 and however many days until the next college football game. And there are the odds right there. If you want to, you can go to your favorite sports book and bet on Kansas State versus Iowa State, which, by the way, K-State, if anybody's tracking, opens as a 2.5-point favorite. We don't even know who's going to be on the team yet, but they're a 2.5-point favorite, Fitz. So if you want to do that, you can. I think it's awesome. I mean, I guess I wasn't as conscious about these games in the past because, it didn't deal with the team that I covered directly or even a team within the conference. But I can definitely say that I watched all of these games, all of these, games that have been in Ireland, all of these games that have been week 0 games. I remember watching Adrian Martinez play Illinois while he was at Nebraska. And then Notre Dame opened in Ireland a few years ago. And then obviously Georgia Tech and Florida State. Like, these have been games that have been on my television. But I think there's a specific draw to K-State and Iowa State because this is really the first time that we've seen a rivalry game out there. And so I remember when this first happened, Fitz, I was kind of skeptical about it. But the more time goes and the closer we get, I'm getting fired up because I think it could be a really good thing for the athletic department.
Sometimes I feel like these games are just staged for TV. They're just, we're going to play this game in Timbuktu. But I also, with this game, I feel like they're actually really invested in the success of this. This is a point of pride for the Irish people, the nation, and those promoters there in Dublin. But there is some some betting advice I think everyone needs to adhere to for a game that is going to take place in Ireland. Cole, if you're really confident on your bet, if you really feel like Iowa State or K-State's going to win, you know what you're supposed to be doing? Doubling that bet.
That's good.
Yeah,
I didn't think about that. What do we think the Irish are going to think about Avery Johnson's long hair? I don't know how many Irish people have long hair.
That's not true. I guess that's Scottish up in the Highlands. I'm Irish. Look, come on, man.
Hence the comment.
I'll say this. I am concerned, though, that leading up to kickoff, in those moments before kickoff, when the fans have migrated from the Temple Bar District to the stadium, I'm afraid the people of Dublin are going to say, thank God, those people from Iowa and Kansas drink too much. Because if the Irish say that about you, that's a badge of honor.
They're not going to have any Busch Light there. Let's just call it how it is. So people are going to have to get used to Guinness. Did you see Joe Montana wearing a Guinness shirt the national championship game, by the way? Can't even support his alma mater. He has to wear a Guinness t-shirt, which I guess kind of goes hand in hand with the Fighting Irish.
Okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Here's on to the next one. Does Chris Kleiman have one of the best quarterback resumes for a head coach? KSU Royals Cat. Do you think he's a Dodgers fan?
I don't think so.
Okay. That's why I have you here. It's impressive, man. I mean, I'll let you list them off. It's incredible how no superstars, right? I mean, even Jordan Love falls into the recruited by him category.
For Matt Wells, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And then I'm Jordan Love. That's the wrong one. Who was the quarterback at North Dakota State?
Well, you got Carson Wentz, Trey Lance. Yep.
I just had another senior.
But you're right about Jordan Love. I mean, Matt Wells in Utah.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But it's impressive. He is developing quarterbacks through his system that fit the NFL. And, of course, this leads up to Will Howard. And I think he went to Ohio State, which is going to be the next question, with a great skill set that he was able to put on display. I think he teaches quarterbacks to understand defenses. As a defensive coordinator / head coach, well, he's not former coordinator. Mm-hmm. As a defensive guy, he teaches them to understand the defense as much as the offense. And honestly, I don't think that's a trait. A lot of quarterbacks study film, but they don't understand the decision-making lying underneath what they see on film. And I think he does a good job of that. I think there's something to be said. This isn't fortune or just good luck. He knows what he's looking for, and he knows how to develop it.
So I believe I'm correct with this. Every single quarterback Chris Kleiman has coached, or at least going back to North Dakota State, is currently on an NFL roster. So you might triple check me, somebody in the comments on Twitter. Let me know. I'm pretty sure that is correct, because you have Carson Wentz. You start with Carson Wentz, who is a backup for the Chiefs. Then you have Easton Stick, who is a backup for the Chargers. And Trey Lance, obviously, he recruited Trey Lance, didn't actually get to coach him, backup for the Cowboys. So those would be three quarterbacks at North Dakota State. Comes to Kansas State, gets Skylar Thompson, inherits Skylar Thompson, turns him from a guy who maybe fans wanted to push out of town to turn around to having multiple 8-win seasons, then becoming, obviously, started a playoff game for the Dolphins. Now he's a backup for the Steelers. After that, you get Adrian Martinez, who is currently on an NFL roster with the New York Jets as of this very moment, also was a UFL MVP. And then, of course, Will Howard, who we're all expecting to get taken in the NFL draft, which leads to Avery Johnson. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that Avery Johnson probably has just as good a potential as any of the quarterbacks he's coached. But it goes back to that. Fitz, like, it's remarkable, because I don't know how many other coaches can say that they've had NFL caliber quarterbacks from essentially 2000 and 13 or 14. I mean, every quarterback he's had has played in the NFL. Think about that. That's just crazy. Absolutely crazy.
10-year run. Yeah.
It's
amazing. I don't think it's ending. I think Will Howard will carry it on. I think Avery Johnson, at the very least, will be on a roster. He may not have the measurements you want from an NFL quarterback, at least not yet in terms of size. He needs to fill out, but he is just a 19-year-old kid, pushing 20. Yeah, I think I saw him drinking on social media. Huh.
Going back to the before we move on, Fitz, I don't know how many other programs. Like, I'd have to go back and look and really, really think how many coaches have been head coach with this run of consistent starters that are not necessarily starters in the NFL, but on NFL rosters. I don't think there's any Big 12 schools that have had a run of quarterbacks like this. So it's interesting.
I just want to point out, I never drank until I was 21. I lied often, which I've never stopped. So
drinking or lying?
Now, neither. I would do both exceptionally well. But yes, I never touched alcohol until I was 21.
Good.
But I did lie a lot. Here we go. On to the next one. K-State Kyle wants to know this. How much of Will Howard's improvement was because of Ryan Day and Chip Kelly? It's a great question. It's hard. It's really almost impossible to measure that, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's more Chip Kelly than Ryan Day.
I agree.
I'm not taking shots at Ryan Day, but, he was
the head coach.
Yeah, and he manages the game. Chip Kelly works with Will Howard every day, and it's impossible to not get better under a guy like that. One of the greatest offensive minds in the history of college football. Fitz. I don't think that's too much of a stretch. Chip Kelly's an outstanding coach, but I give the credit to Will. Like, that is a kid who, as soon as he left Kansas State, was bound and determined to become a better football player. Let's be honest. At Kansas State, the version of that we saw of Will Howard in the final game against Iowa State, that version of Will Howard would not have been good enough to win a national championship at Ohio State. So I give the kid a lot of credit for bettering himself in the offseason and turning into the player that he was. Now, that's the story of Will Howard's career, though. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that he got better in the offseason, because when he showed up as a freshman compared to when he left as a senior, he was a completely different player. His body was completely different. He threw a completely different ball. The style of quarterback was completely different. And he just finished his college career as really what he had been working up to his whole entire career at K-State.
It is interesting to think about what his learning curve would have led to if he'd stayed at Kansas State. And that's a good question. Let's follow up with that. Where would K-State have been with Will Howard as quarterback in 2024?
I don't think they necessarily would have been much different. Could they have had an outside chance at making the college football playoff? Sure. I think he got a chance to beat Iowa State and Houston if he's at quarterback, and that's not a shot at Avery Johnson, but Will Howard was really good at Ohio State because he was a game manager, right? He didn't have to do all of the crazy things, but let's not make it seem like he was perfect. I mean, this is a guy who lost 2 games at Ohio State. So in the old format, that Ohio State team doesn't even make the playoffs. Nope. And Ryan Day's probably fired, and Will Howard is run out of town.
It's crazy.
Instead, they want to build a statue for both guys. Rightfully so. They're the best team in college football. But I think maybe K-State's in the playoff, but the Avery Johnson's not here. So the conversation ends right there. And K-State is in a better position to make a playoff run for this year and next year because of the move that they made this year. And people can disagree with that. And as Coach Tang likes to say, there's a certain school down the road who definitely has had some opinions on social media about this. And I understand that, but I really do believe that K-State made the right decision. Will Howard made the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no bitterness. Everybody is happy for the outcome for that young man from Downingtown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I don't know why people are dead set that there was tension about it. Will had this burning desire to do something bigger, which was almost just go to the NFL. He opted out of doing that when he got the Ohio State offer, that's an incredible offer for a kid from Pennsylvania. I mean, that's amazing. You grew up watching that brand of football, and now you get to play it. You get to be surrounded by NFL level skill guys, and just go out there and do your thing. But what's interesting is I didn't see him being asked to do anything that much different than what he was asked to do at Kansas State. He just had better weapons around him.
Yep.
He ran the ball basically the same way he did at Kansas State. He passed and handed off about the same ratio he did at Kansas State. He just did it with elite talent. And I think he proved that when given the weapons, you'll get the ball to him and they can make plays. You know what that meant? He may not be the most highly coveted of the talent on that offense. We'll see a lot of players drafted before him from that same offense. But without him, they didn't have that next step. And There's a reason why he was MVP. It was pretty cool. I'm really happy for him. But yeah, if I could have the equivalent of Chip Kelly as my podcast coach, I think I would probably up my game. The guy's brilliant. The guy's, and we don't talk about this. This has been a topic college football fans have just glossed over. Chip Kelly made a brilliant move to leave from being a head coach to being an offensive coordinator. At some point, he said, I'm not happy doing all this stuff as a head coach. I want to call plays. Worked out pretty well.
Will went from Bill O'Brien to Chip Kelly in literally like 2 days. People forget about that too.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What would have happened if they had Bill O'Brien as offense coordinator? I'm going to venture to guess not this.
Yep.
There we go. Here's the last one from Claws Out, Balls Out, which always sounds painful. Which of the football transfers have the best chances to start next year? You handle a lot of our recruiting. What say you?
Gunnar Maldonado is the first one that came to my mind.
Well, as a follow-up to that, how is his injury status?
Well, that's going to be something that we're going to have to find out. I would assume whenever Kansas State has signing day and they announce all their transfer portal class, that would be on top of everything. There's been conflicting reports that say he'll be ready to go for the spring, and other Arizona people have said he's going to miss the spring. I, however, would have to imagine that if he was such a coveted player as he was in the transfer portal, that he'd be ready to go. I would also caution people to maybe take these transfer portal rankings with a grain of salt. I thought Ryan Wallace did a great job examining the transfer portal ranking classes of every Big 12 school. I think K-State's like 9th or something like that. But again, it's so hard to rate these players. And I understand why we do it, because that's kind of our job. But are you rating them on potential? Are you rating them on production? What are we rating them on here? Because you can't rate them on the same scale as high school prospects. But to answer the question, I think Gunnar Maldonado is like the first one that really jumps out to mind. And then I look at the receiver position and just based solely on numbers, Jace Brown, and then whoever you want to pick out of the handful of receivers that they brought in.
Yeah, the transfer portal is a tool, and just because you use it less might mean you're building in another way. They have focused their NIL on retaining players that have proven themselves at Kansas State. I think that is a wise move. Once in a while, you need to get out there on the recruiting trail and pay to get a player you really want, but they really do shy away from that, Cole. They did it with a quarterback, Avery Johnson. He's a transformational type of figure. He's got a lot of importance beyond just winning and losing. I think he's the kind of guy you want leading your locker room. So they've stayed away from throwing money around in the portal, and that changes who you get. It also means this, Cole, by concentrating your money internally, you don't have to fill as many holes.
Yep.
You don't. K-State honestly did not have the attrition one would expect. And the guys that did leave, I think there was an agreement on that departure. They did bring in 3 guys from receiver. They did lose 2 guys to the portal off of the receiving core. But I think that was one or two of those guys were coming anyhow because they needed to upgrade that position. They needed more competition in that room.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't see this as a flat comparison. It's not like recruiting in which you've got this dramatic surge of talent coming in. How's it rate? Because it's going to be here for years. This is, what do we need? What can we get? And it's almost like you should be graded against your needs and accomplishments in bringing players in. But that's not how it works. Tech has a great class because let's be blunt. A donor stepped up and said, let's go get the guys. Maybe it'll work. We've seen evidence that bringing in players that want the best deal possible, the highest bid wins, may not be good. We'll see how that functions over on the football side too. The transfer portal is complicated. It's not an easy tool to use. You have to be able to use it correctly for your program, and that might be different in Manhattan, Kansas than Lubbock, Texas, or certainly Columbus, Ohio.
You cannot at Kansas State go out and do what Ohio State did, right? You can't just go out and swing for the big names, because if you do that, you're going to miss. And like, I know that Big B has talked about that, like, oh, we need to go out and get guys that we can hit home runs with. And I agree with Brian when he says that, but there's a difference between hitting a Kansas State home run and hitting an Ohio State home run. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Until Kansas State consistently finds itself in the college football playoff and its NIL pockets increase, they're not going to be competing for the Caleb Downses of the world. They're not going to be competing for the Isaiah Bonds of the world who went from Alabama to Texas. Like, that's not going to happen. But what they can do, Fitz, is they can go get the Jay Sean Rosses of the world who would have played at Alabama next year, decided he wanted to come closer to home, and K-State was the school he wanted to go to. You know why? Because K-State got their foot in the door. He was a local kid, and they never gave up, because Dylan Edwards goes to Colorado and wants to come home because Kansas State never let go of that relationship. You know what? That's how you have to recruit high-level transfer portal players at K-State, is you get to know them as high school prospects, if they're from around the area or not, and you never let go of that relationship. And this staff is as genuine as it comes, and that's how they're able to get some of these big-time transfers.
Yep, it's going to be interesting to monitor the transfer portal, how it impacts. I don't think there's any doubt that Ohio State used it perfectly. The difference with Ohio State is you bring in some really talented players, like some expensive players, and they're not the best players on the team. You know, they're not coming in to play a role in the bigger picture. And I think Ryan Day did a brilliant job of putting that picture together in the postseason. And I think college football is better for how this all came out. With no SEC team in the championship game again. Ohio State isn't like a victory for the little guy. That's not what we're saying. But it does show that it's possible to bounce back from season troubles now. Being upset by your rival doesn't end your season. You've got a chance at redemption, and Will Howard delivered that. He was brilliant in the postseason. Brilliant. Someone had sent out a meme of an AI image of Tom Brady in an Ohio State uniform wearing the 18. I mean, it was like, he was basically the college Brady for 4 games in a row. It was impressive.
It was.
That's it for this edition of the podcast. That was Cole Carmody, one of our many analysts and reporters here at Go Powercat. He handles a lot of our football and recruiting stuff. I kind of like him. I'm going to keep him around for a while, even though he lives in Kansas City now. But he didn't want to be in the same town as Ryan Gilbert, so can't blame him.
Exactly. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.